So I want to invite you into a big, juicy mess with me. This is going to be a beefy mess. You might need Gatorade. Long haul sermonating today, so be comfortable because we have a beautiful cultural situation on our hands that embraces us now and here. Before I do that, though, I have to check some technology that has just popped up on the main screen. So, mess. We are on a weekend of holidays. First of all, and most importantly, today is Clergy Appreciation Sunday. Please, thank you. I feel very appreciated. We also shout out to our community affiliated minister, Reverend Christiana Haida, who also we're showering here with appreciation, and to our other ministers in the Baja 4. But that's not the mess that I wanted to talk about. I want to talk about tomorrow. So tomorrow is Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day, and National Coming Out Day. And the invitation is to ask ourselves, how do all of those talk to us? So instead of picking out one or the other, we're going to sit with them in the floodplain, and we're going to ask ourselves, what does it mean to sit with all of this, to hold all of this together? And is there a map, to Debbie's point, that can help us navigate it? So let's start with Columbus Day. I want to draw this lineage of Columbus Day out for us a little bit and dig in to the humanity of it. What I would invite for us as we're listening to these stories is to say, how can I value the people and the stories that I'm hearing? How can I enter the floodplain of their lives? That our skill here, what we do here, is the practice of coming alongside and embrace. So March 14, 1891, New Orleans. A police chief there is killed on his way home from work. And when someone asks who did it, someone whispers, the Italians. This sets off one of the worst Italian-American experiences of discrimination and harm in the United States. Soon, all these Italians, hundreds of Italians, are rounded up, put into a prison, and then tried. Now, the trials themselves end in mistrials and juries that can't decide and people who got off. So what happened? The newspaper incited this sense that we have to reclaim New Orleans from these Italians. And so off a mob went to the prison. In fact, one part of the mob went over to the place where the government kept their arms, removed the arms from there, broke into the prison, and did their own form of vigilante injustice. And by the end of that time, 11 Italian Americans were dead. Now, the person who killed the police chief was never actually found, but 1 year later, October 12th, 1892, President Harrison proclaims a day for Columbus Day. Now, that would be the 400th time of an anniversary of Columbus and Columbus's arrival, not actually in the continental US, but in the Bahamas. And part of that effort was an effort to reclaim a story about the values of immigration and the values of immigrants, of Columbus imagined as an immigrant coming to the United States, painting a lineage of people who could be proud of what they've done. And even though I did the hair hanging quotes, I want to enter the story of a people who feel so dehumanized that the way they think out of dehumanization is alliance with other folks who have caused harm. Enter that. Now, this day becomes a day that Italian Americans in the United States begin to celebrate. Hey, we contributed. You see that move? Hey, pay attention. We have value. We contributed. And the story and the map morphs. Now, September 1977, the United Nations Conference Against Discrimination of Indigenous Peoples. Indigenous peoples make their way to Geneva for a conference unlikely. In fact, some folks were not even allowed to leave their countries, and other folks were not even allowed back in, just to be indigenous and show up at the United Nations and proclaim again, we have value. Now, while they're there, 1977, they said, hey, Columbus Day should be resolved as the International Day of Solidarity with the Indigenous Peoples of the Americas. In 1989, 10 years or so after that, South Dakota becomes the first state to recognize it. Then Berkeley, we see you, Berkeley. And then in 2016, Phoenix, Arizona, the largest urban city center to recognize a different telling, an unfixing of an identity about what it means to be a citizen and have humanity is shifted and the map morphs. Now on my calendar, Google Calendar this morning, it said tomorrow was both days. Sit with that. Both days. And on my daughter's calendar, 20 years from now, in whatever spaceship garden she's traveling in, what will it say? What story am I not valuing right now? That 20 years from now, she will say, Mom, how didn't you see it? Now, I could feel this just painful, gross sense of dread that this is being recorded. And in 20 years, someone will come back to this and point out how wrong I was, how politically incorrect that I didn't see what was coming. And I know some of you have heard that before. Isn't this just political correctness? And I want to sit with the gentle part of that, the part of that that feels disconnected from what might be real and feels like, is this just semantics? Is this just saying the right thing? And also the part of us that so desperately always want to do the right thing, especially when it's recorded on YouTube and put on the internet forever. Here is my response to that. We are not interested in political correctness. We are interested in political complexness. We are about how many layers there are. We are about what is asking me to be in relationship now that either I did not know about because of structures, because of numbing, because of pain, because of oppression, but now I have a chance to be in relationship. And it is better to be in relationship than to be right. It has the sustaining power that rightness cannot promise you. When we come to the table because we want to be right, we won't stay there long. Trust me. But when we come to the table because we want to be related, because we want to be in a messy truth together, because we don't want to have to do it alone, that is nourishment. So National Coming Out Day, tomorrow. 1969 Stonewall riots in New York City. A people who, to be safe, had to be secretive. In order to survive, there had to be a place, and only this place, where I could be my full self. And when the police raid happened at Stonewall, suddenly the reality hit, there is no safety here. A wide and open parade moves out and is the beginnings of what we know as Pride. 1978, Harvey Milk, Northern California. We see you, Northern California. Harvey Milk says, come out wherever you are. And as we know, he is killed for it. He's killed for it. October 11th, 1987, the National March on Washington, up to 300,000 lesbian and gay and bisexual and transgender folks and allies gather and march saying, we will not die of AIDS. We will not die of your neglect, your refusal to not see our value. We will not die alone, and we will not die with a government that keeps passing laws meant to make us invisible and criminal. At that point in time, AIDS, our own history's experience with an epidemic pandemic, is in full force. And people I know that you love died. I sit with the tragedy of that. We sit with the tragedy of that. We sit with what the request was that folks who had affection, that was the word, affections and sexual orientations could also be included in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That was the fight, that we couldn't legally discriminate against people for who they loved and how they understood their gender identity. And it wouldn't even come fully to us until 2020. June 15th, the Supreme Court finally rules that lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender intersex folks and beyond can finally say that you cannot discriminate against me in the workplace because of who I am and how I love. But the way they did that was not by adding more words to the 1964 law. It was by saying that you couldn't discriminate against LGBTQ people without doing sex discrimination. Meaning, I can only discriminate against you because I think I know who a man is supposed to be and who a woman is supposed to be. That might not have been what folks in the 1930s and 40s and 50s and 60s who were part of the beginning of the women's rights and the gay and lesbian rights movement could see coming. That actually the blossoming of inclusivity includes us interrogating our fixed understandings of the gender binary, meaning we have to interrogate what we think when we say a man and a woman, and the way that prevents us from not only valuing other people, but from valuing our own selves. Sit with this with me. This is a floodplain. This is a floodplain. Sit with Italian immigrants. Sit with slaves. Sit in New Orleans. Sit in the prison. Sit what it means to be indigenous in this country. Sit with what it means to have to fight to get to the United Nations just to be recognized. Sit with what it means to have been a woman in this country. Sit with what it means to have been anything other than male or female. And I think that would include most of us. Our lives dictated by a map that we did not choose. And the strange resilience of each of us in our own ways, renewing and resisting the map. and the gratitude for the people that paved the way, making space for the rest of us to risk looking at our own selves. Now, we are in an unfixed world, and I mean that as not static, but also not fixed. What I mean is that we as Unitarian Universalists are well positioned to be in this posture rather than this posture. Instead of fixing and making static, we can embrace, we can hold, we can foster interdependence. Now, this is what it means when I say we are part of a liberal tradition. And I don't mean that in the Democratic or Republican sense. I mean that from the word liberal is actually in the DNA of Unitarian and Universalism. We are what is called a liberal faith. And liberal literally means free. What it means is that our orientation, our chosen orientation, is to what's emerging. This is the mirror to a conservative tradition. For a conservative tradition, what's important is how to retain what was. We orient towards emergence. We don't necessarily throw out what was, but where we lean when pressed is towards what is changing, but not just change for change's sake. What is changing so that more people can live just, whole, safe lives? We move towards what's changing because we want more people to know they are valued. And we move towards what is changing because we know it's good to be open to what's on the horizon, because revelation is not sealed. Revelation did not happen back then. It's happening right now. Are we paying attention to it? Are we here in this posture? Now, liberal tradition, our tradition, has pieces that can guide us. We value the capacity of an individual to discern the world around them. We value human experience. We value a shift from a doctrine, a story about what is, to the ethics of what we notice here and now. And so when we say that that's who we are, that we're oriented towards what's possible, then that asks of us, when someone stands before you and says, I have value. And when someone asks that of you, you have a choice of response. And you also, as a person who might have value that has not been recognized, seen, structured, or valued itself, you also have the choice in this tradition to say, I have value. Now, what is the response? The response is not, well, what's the right thing I could say right now? The response is not, how do I be correct? What's the correct thing? Even though I know the roots of wanting to do it right and correct are fostered in a desire to not cause harm. But this is the shift I want to say, because I want to tear the accusation of political correctness away from us. I want us to say we enter this mess and we learn new things because we believe what's coming is revelatory. And we believe what's coming is valuable. And we believe in complexity. And we're here for it. So yes, inconvenience me with something new I had never thought of. Yes, tell me if you are willing to risk it. What we have not seen, yes, tell me. And then when I realize that I want to do this to what says it has value and worth, when I want to go, no, I'm not sure, or no, I can't. What I know is that says I have grief work to do. When I push away, what I know is I need to dig in and tend. And when I feel tended, I will re-embrace. So see this move, it is an embracing of each of us to embrace all of us. Now, our third UU principle as it's currently written, because remember, we're in a revision season, new principles are on the horizon. You heard it here first, but our third principle is acceptance of one another and encouragement of spiritual growth in our congregations. And what I love as we sit at the tree in the floodplain is that we imagine a growth, again, that's not about transcending out of the world. It's about descending into the world. Reverend Dr. Rob Hardy's writes this so beautifully. Spiritual growth isn't about vertical ascent, but about growth in every dimension. Think spirituality in 3D. Growth in spirit is about measuring one's proximity to something else. Growth in spirit is about the spaciousness. You feel that? The spaciousness of one's soul, its volume, its capacity, its size. We need souls that can love and be in relationship with complexity. And instead of fight or flight, we need a spiritual posture of embrace. Floodplain time means new approaches to maps. We started our sermon today with Columbus, one version of map making, territory seeking complexity that actually led to the dehumanization of people. Our orientation is to making ways of being, making new maps in ourselves and among each other that guide us to deeper humanization. There is a person 525 years after Columbus, Lucas La Rochelle, who was 20-something years old at a university in Montreal in 2018. And they were riding their bike past a tree, because we're choosing trees and not cars, remember folks? So they rode their bike past a tree where they and their lover had had many conversations together. And they realized this tree was not a gay bar or a coffee house or a bookshop or a dance club, but that tree was sacred space. For them, that tree was queer space. And they used that word in the way we used it with Reverend Bethany last week, as a reclaimed word, a word that invites us to make strange things we thought were fixed, a word that invites us to embrace what shows up that challenges what we think should be normal. And so they said, this tree is queer space. How many other queer spaces are there? So they decided to make their own map. Now they gathered some techie friends at the university and they created an online map that looks a lot like Google Maps, but not Google Maps. It's pink. It's a beautiful pink and purple color. And when you click it, you participate in it. Now, instead of dots that show where businesses are that you can buy things from, you drop pins, black pins, anywhere you've had the experience of queer love. Now, any experience, any memory reverberating out into space, and they called it queering the map. Now, they started with just their pins, but that felt boring. So they invited friends, and soon there was 100 pins, and then there were 600 pins, and then there was 6,500 pins. And that is when a group of techie folks who were homophobic and pro Donald Trump sent a malicious software into the map so that it would drop hundreds and hundreds of homophobic pro-Trump pins. Now, when that happened, Lucas took the map down and called for help. In its stead, a group of people from across the world redesigned the map, protecting it from future malware. Relieved to have it up. A couple years ago, it was at 120,000 pins, including pins where the Titanic is, about folks' perceptions of Rose and Jack. I highly recommend clicking on that part. But what was created was a new map. And what it invites each of us, whether or not you or we or I identify as queer, what it invites is for you to be impacted and changed and emerge with queer love. So when you click through it, you are going through the fragments of people's lived experiences. You could go to your childhood home and experience the world differently than you did. You can go to Tucson and experience our community from the perspective of love. Can we cultivate the kind of posture that that map invites all of us to? Can we multiply value? Can we risk claiming our value? Lucas's next plan for the map is to create a tool where the overlay of queer love is overlaid with Indigenous territories. These are the maps of our future. Not a map where you are erased. A map where all of us are more valued. So come, let's get lost in the map. Come, let's hold this together. Come, let's be messy, complex, and unfixed up. Come, I value you. Come, you are valuable. Amen.
I was wearing a pride shirt. A woman said she was really happy I wore that shirt out that day and thanked me. I never saw her again. I hope she's doing well.
Our first date in Tucson, when you were here to visit while we were still long distance. I asked you to move here with me.
One of the earliest pictures of us as a couple is in this canyon along this trail somewhere. Gosh, how we loved the mountains and moonrises when we lived here.
Every second in the Pride Alliance office, I spent figuring out who I am.
This is the place my mom called me the right name for the first time.
Where we made our first home.
Came out as trans at work.
I came out to you as non-binary. I was so scared you wouldn't believe me or would break up with me. You were so supportive. I love you so much.
Came out as a lesbian to my friends and peers. It went great. Turns out most people here were a similar flavor of queer.
Came out to my Mexican family at midnight during a family reunion, just to cause family drama. Wait until they find out they've met several of my boyfriends.
We kissed for the first time right here, and I swear, if I could go back, I would kiss you harder.
Came out to my brother.
We were walking together, and at that moment, I looked into your eyes and I fell in love with you. My best friend, it was a rush of joy and fear at the same time. I'm still in love with you.
My first time going out in drag.
We sang in the choir together at Southside Pres when we lived in Tucson, and it was wonderful.
We saw a shooting star here on our first anniversary. The first time I ever explicitly said I was bi out loud, on the way home with some friends, I shared my experience and felt so relieved to be accepted. Now people say they wish they could be as open about their sexuality as I am. You can do it. If I can do it, you can. I believe in you all.
I was wearing a pride shirt. A woman said she was really happy I wore that shirt out that day and thanked me. I never saw her again. I hope she's doing well.
Our first date in Tucson, when you were here to visit while we were still long distance. I asked you to move here with me.
One of the earliest pictures of us as a couple is in this canyon along this trail somewhere. Gosh, how we loved the mountains and moonrises when we lived here.
Every second in the Pride Alliance office, I spent figuring out who I am.
This is the place my mom called me the right name for the first time.
Where we made our first home.
Came out as trans at work.
I came out to you as non-binary. I was so scared you wouldn't believe me or would break up with me. You were so supportive. I love you so much.
Came out as a lesbian to my friends and peers. It went great. Turns out most people here were similar flavor of queer.
Came out to my Mexican family at midnight during a family reunion, just to cause family drama. Wait until they find out they've met several of my boyfriends.
We kissed for the first time right here, and I swear, if I could go back, I would kiss you harder.
Came out to my brother.
We were walking together, and at that moment, I looked into your eyes and I fell in love with you. My best friend, it was a rush of joy and fear at the same time. I'm still in love with you.
My first time going out in drag.
We sang in the choir together at Southside Pres when we lived in Tucson, and it was wonderful.
We saw a shooting star here on our first anniversary. The first time I ever explicitly said I was bi out loud, on the way home with some friends, I shared my experience and felt so relieved to be accepted.
I was wearing a pride shirt. A woman said she was really happy I wore that shirt out that day and thanked me. I never saw her again. I hope she's doing well.
Our first date in Tucson, when you were here to visit while we were still long distance. I asked you to move here with me.
One of the earliest pictures of us as a couple is in this canyon along this trail somewhere. Gosh, how we loved the mountains and moonrises when we lived here.
Every second in the Pride Alliance office, I spent figuring out who I am.
This is the place my mom called me the right name for the first time.
Where we made our first home.
Came out as trans at work.
I came out to you as non-binary. I was so scared you wouldn't believe me or would break up with me. You were so supportive. I love you so much.
Came out as a lesbian to my friends and peers. It went great. Turns out most people here were similar flavor of queer.
Came out to my Mexican family at midnight during a family reunion, just to cause family drama. Wait until they find out they've met several of my boyfriends.
We kissed for the first time right here, and I swear, if I could go back, I would kiss you harder.
Came out to my brother.
We were walking together, and at that moment, I looked into your eyes and I fell in love with you. My best friend. It was a rush of joy and fear at the same time. I'm still in love with you.
My first time going out in drag.
We sang in the choir together at Southside Pres when we lived in Tucson, and it was wonderful.
We saw a shooting star here on our first anniversary. The first time I ever explicitly said I was bi out loud, on the way home with some friends, I shared my experience and felt so relieved to be accepted. Now people say they wish they could be as open about their sexuality as I am. You can do it. If I can do it, you can. I believe in you all.